The forensics pointed to an accidental death, but the circumstantial evidence suggested something more sinister. Was it possible that an alarm clock, some laundry, and a trash bag could explain the mystery of a young woman's death? The United States Air Force has the most technologically advanced fighter jets in the world. As a mechanic, Staff Sergeant Ron Gillette's job was to keep those jets flying. He was good at it too, and worked at both the George Air Force Base in California and the Nellis Base in Las Vegas.
He was very competent. He would not have gone on so many temporary duty assignments to Nellis Air Force Base had he not been very good at his job.
Ron, his wife Vicki, and their 2 children made their home in California, where they both grew up. On August 28, 1984, Ron returned home after running some errands. At first glance, it looked like his wife was sleeping in bed with their 3-year-old son. But when he looked closer, he noticed she was unconscious. A plastic laundry bag was close to her face.
He said that she passed out, if you will, and lay on the bed, and the bag fell on her face, and then when he got there, her face was covered with the bag, and she suffocated.
When paramedics arrived, they pronounced Vicki dead at the scene. She was 26 years old.
She was lying on her side, and there was blood coming from her mouth and her nose, which indicated to us possibly a drug overdose. Ron was there, very distraught, crying uncontrollably, very upset.
Ron told investigators that Vicki had some problems sleeping, so the night before, at her request, he put 4 sleeping pills into her mixed drink. It appeared that Vicki lost consciousness while doing the laundry and rolled over onto the plastic laundry bag. On the kitchen counter, investigators found a used glass and an empty container of an over-the-counter sleep medication in the trash.
We then sent the drinks off that were found in the house to the laboratory so that they could do testing on it using a gas chromatograph mass spectrometer to try to identify the presence of drugs in the drinks.
And the only drug that was found was the over-the-counter sleep medication. The autopsy didn't reveal much.
It was a typical problematic case. You've got somebody who's dead, and the autopsy doesn't really show very much, very non-specific things.
The medical examiner found some swelling in Vicki's lungs, called pulmonary edema, and a scrape on her upper lip. But there was no evidence of asphyxiation. The cause of Vicki's death was officially ruled as undetermined.
I think the original autopsy listed cause of death unknown, with the kind of a question mark, liver disease or liver failure as a potential contributing factor.
Ron's co-workers corroborated his alibi that he was working on the morning of his wife's death, and investigators were about to chalk this up to an unfortunate accident.
She did not have any drinking or drug problems, and that she was a loving mother to her 2 young children, who I believe were ages 3 and 5 at the time. And there was no evidence there that to be gleaned that would indicate, explain her death.
But Ron Gillette, of all people, wouldn't let the investigation die.
When we were at the funeral house, Ron ran to the coffin and fell on his knees and started crying and screaming and saying, Vicki, why did you do that to yourself and to me and to my kids?
The medical examiner ruled the cause of Vicki Gillette's death as undetermined. Even to cynical investigators, there was nothing to indicate foul play.
We had nothing. We had no murder weapon, we had no motive, we had no evidence that a murder had even been committed.
Toxicology tests performed during Vicki's autopsy found sleeping pills in her system, and scientists estimated she had consumed about 16 tablets, not the 4 Ron told them about. But 16 tablets is a small fraction of a fatal dose, and it was entirely possible that Vicki had taken the pills herself. Investigators did find some suspicious items in the Gillette's apartment. First, there was an alarm clock in the master bedroom set to 3 a.m. And inside the plastic laundry bag found next to Vicki's body were clothes, but not the kind you'd expect.
I think there was a shirt in there that was still partially folded. And so I smelled the clothes, and they had the distinct smell of detergent. These weren't old clothes. This wasn't dirty laundry.
That created all sorts of eyebrow raising on our part. So now we had what we believed was a staged crime scene.
Then a new witness came forward who saw something suspicious on the morning Vicki died.
There was a neighbor who saw Ron waiting on the steps for the ambulance to arrive. When the ambulance showed up, then he started crying. That was pretty compelling.
And if that weren't enough, just 11 days after Vicki's death, Ron Gillette was spotted at a local rental car agency when he returned from a trip to Las Vegas.
She said, you know that guy whose wife died? He rented a car for me not long after she died. He just brought the car back. Attached to the rearview mirror of the car was one of those wedding decorations. And attached to his arm was a very attractive young Hispanic woman. They seemed to be very close, very intimate.
Investigators literally couldn't believe it, so they called Ron to check the story.
Ron said, yeah, that's my new wife. He said, I just married her. She's a wonderful person. And he said, well, you know, my children, he told me my children really need a mother. They need a mother. They need someone in their lives.
I could not believe it. I was waiting for her, for the kids, for my sister. It was really sad. It's something that you can believe it.
Ron's new bride, Sue Yen, was a Nicaraguan citizen living in Las Vegas. Ron said he met her a year earlier.
He was living 2 separate lives, the life with his wife and children at George Air Force Base, and the life with his new love interest at Nellis Air Force Base. And he was on temporary duty assignment quite regularly.
Interesting to note that Sue Yen told us that she was pregnant with twins, which was another piece of this puzzle.
Sue Yen said they had been engaged for months, and she had given him an ultimatum.
Sue Yen told Ron that if you don't marry me this time, in September, it's over. Period. I don't want to see you anymore. And Ron really loved her. A very attractive young lady.
Investigators discovered that the wedding invitations were mailed before Vicki's death. Sue Yen told police that she was unaware Ron had been lying to her.
She said that she knew nothing of this, and he had told her that Vicki had died of brain cancer 2 years ago in Mexico.
We knew Sue Yen had really nothing to do with this. She was a dupe.
Usually you have a cause of death in search of a motive, but now we had a motive. Now we had a motive really in search of a cause of death.
We believe that Ron Gillette killed Vicki rather than divorce her because he got so far in debt for the wedding that he needed money to pay off all his debt that he had accrued in buying the wedding ring, the wedding gown, and all the wedding invitations and the honeymoon. He had a life insurance policy on Vicki in the amount of $27,000. That would have paid off all his debt and gave him some money to spare.
Investigators now had plenty of circumstantial evidence to suggest homicide, but little, if any, forensic evidence. Could a second look at the Gillette's apartment yield something useful?
Marrying this other woman, literally days after he buries Vicky, he goes to Las Vegas and marries Sue Yin and brings her back after the honeymoon to the same home where Vicky has died literally 2 weeks earlier. And you're right, you could not script that and have it be believable.
With behavior like that, investigators re-examined the circumstances surrounding Vicky Gillette's death. Kevin Poorman analyzed the plastic laundry bag found next to Vicky's body. It was actually a trash bag.
The forensic side of me began to try to assess, what can we do with the bag? What's the potential value of the bag? Is there any forensic processing that needs to be done with the bag?
Ron Gillette said he found Vicky in bed with the plastic bag on or close to her face, as if she had accidentally rolled onto it and suffocated. To test this theory, investigators looked for facial oils on the outside of the bag. Poorman placed the bag in an airtight chamber and then introduced heated super glue, which adheres to any skin oils present. But he found none.
I can't tell you how disappointed we were when he made that phone call.
But when he got off the phone, Poorman realized he had made a crucial mistake.
We realized that the bag was inside out. That because it's the way it's manufactured, it's a pleated bag, and there's a heat seal on one end. And when you pull it inside out, it doesn't lay flat anymore.
Poorman repeated the superglue fuming test, and this time, he found something.
What we saw was a large oval area that at some point, something oval and presumably oily was present.
When he examined the bag with special lighting, Poorman saw even more.
Under oblique lighting is when I really saw the facial features, in particular the stretched impression of the nose area and the chin area in the center of this large oval. And I remember thinking to myself at that point, I wonder if we're looking at the death mask of Vicky Gillette.
Poorman searched the forensic literature, hoping to find some way to confirm that this was a facial impression. But he found nothing. So he devised a test of his own with trash bags which were the same brand as Vicky's laundry bag.
And what we did was have the volunteer place their face on the bag, and we pushed from behind their face into the bag to create face impressions, looking for not only the actual transfer of oils to the bag, but also to see whether there were any actual stretching that was occurring in the bag itself.
Poorman used 6 different bags, and each time he increased the pressure on the subject's face. After the 6th test, the volunteer said the pressure was so great she declined to participate further. Poorman looked at all 6 bags, and only one matched the stretch marks found on the laundry bag. It was the last one, the one where the most pressure had been applied. This test proved that the image on the laundry bag was a human face and was created by extreme force, not by accidentally rolling onto it.
And we got very excited because now we had the murder weapon. This was huge.
And a life-sized photograph of Vicky Gillette was a perfect match of the image on the laundry bag. Ron Gillette was arrested and charged with his wife's murder.
Never had a plastic bag with a face print ever been used in any murder trial ever. The defense attorney called it the Shroud of Poorman, but we just called it the death mask. And that was our version. This is the death mask of Vicky Gillette.
But prosecutors wondered whether their trash bag test would hold up in court. Prosecutors believed that Ron Gillette decided weeks, if not months earlier, to kill his wife, Vicki, in order to marry his Las Vegas fiancée, Sue Yen. Ron's telephone calls to Sue Yen were proof of premeditation.
Beginning in August, he started calling from his home phone. This was significant because we found out that Vicki paid all the bills. He started calling from his home phone in August because he knew she was not going to be alive to open up the bill and pay it.
And investigators found evidence that Vicki's kneecaps had been broken and surgically repaired 18 months before her death. Ron admitted during police questioning that he was the culprit.
Ron said Vicki had dropped some pretzels and I became angry with her and I pushed her to the floor and broke her kneecaps. So we have now an admission of a propensity for violence with his wife, some domestic abuse, which is, helping us sew this case up.
Prosecutors say the night before Vicki's death, Ron Gillette crushed 14 sleeping pills and put them into Vicki's drink, believing this would kill her. Ron set the alarm for 3 a.m. And when he awoke, he was surprised to find Vicki still alive. So he decided to suffocate her with a plastic trash bag. But her face oils and the impressions from her nose and chin were left on the bag. Ron turned the bag inside out, filled it with clean laundry, and placed it on the bed to make her death appear accidental. He then put his 3-year-old son into bed with his dead wife to further mask the deception.
And in so doing, a completely heinous act where he leaves the young son in bed with the dead mother. The son didn't wake up. By the grace of God, the son didn't wake up and find his mother dead.
11 days later, with Vicki out of the way, Ron married his fiancée, Sue Yen, and used Vicki's $27,000 life insurance to pay for the wedding.
What's interesting is that they had already sent out wedding invitations to family members while Vicki was still around. Had ordered the cake, had set up the groomsmen and the tuxedos and the dresses.
At the trial, the defense claimed Ron was telling the truth, that Vicki's death was an accident. Their position was that the autopsy did not corroborate the prosecution's theory.
Our approach from the defense standpoint was to show that there was no homicide, that Vicki, his first wife, had died of some kind of natural, I say natural causes, or at least unexplained causes. That we were going to admit that Ron had developed this relationship with Sue Yen while on temporary duty assignment at another Air Force base, but it was simply happenstance.
And the defense had a surprise witness, a Navy pathologist who would be testifying that there was no homicide. But something happened just before he was to take the stand.
I was looking at the slides, looking at the report, going back and forth. And suddenly I said, wait a minute, this case looks exactly like another one I've seen recently, where a man died because a car slipped off the jack, landed on his chest, and kept him from breathing.
The evidence in that case were small ruptured blood vessels on the man's lungs. Dr. Clark reviewed the autopsy slides and found the same bleeding in Vicki Gillette's lungs.
Seeing the little areas of bleeding there is indicative of pressure changes in the lung that you see when airflow is obstructed through the nose and mouth.
Dr. Clark changed his mind. He now believed Vicki Gillette had been murdered. He told the defense about this on the morning he was set to testify.
It was just like being hit in the stomach and having all the air go out of your body.
The prosecution called Dr. Clark to the stand, and his findings, along with the trash bag tests, convinced the jury.
If we didn't have that plastic bag, we were screwed. We could not prove this without the plastic bag. We had the murder weapon. That was the key to the whole damn thing.
Ron Gillette was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was almost sentenced to death. But one juror held out, so he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Incredibly, Ron served only 15 years of that sentence before he was released for good behavior. He now lives in Las Vegas with Sue Yen and their children.
I didn't know. I didn't know until he was free.
Does it anger me? Yes. Ron deserves to be in jail for the rest of his natural life. That's where he deserves to be. He murdered this woman with callous disregard. He had another life he wanted to go on to, so he took the mother of his children and his wife of some years and just killed her because he had better things to do.